Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting. I call this meeting to order, and we need to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
All those in favor? Aye. The next thing is the approval of the March 21st open session minutes.
Okay, I do not have any changes.
Neither.
Okay, motion to approve the March 21st open session minutes.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye. Okay, policies for second review.
Yes, the policy 4-8, child abuse reports and investigations. This policy came before you at the last policy committee meeting. It was reviewed by the board at the last board meeting, and the recommendation by staff is for it to be put up for approval at the May 1st meeting. If you recall, the only change to that is a reporting requirement that is in state board policy and statutory changes.
I don't have anything to 4-8.
I do not either.
I do have one question. Since who knows or has a reason to believe that licensed employee also being non-licensed employees as well?
It's written. Okay, they're on. Yeah, hers was on. That's fine. Yes, the reason it's written as licensed employees because that's what the legal requirement is. Licensed employees. The board can obviously expand that to all employees, but license is just because that's the way the statute reads. Yeah.
4-13 school assignment. I just noticed too that new policy is under policies for second review. We never put it for first review. We tabled it.
That's my fault.
No, it's no big deal.
Well, I was doing second review by the policy committee, but I can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I get what you're saying. Never mind.
I tried to revise
no, that
the
works.
agenda.
No, that works.
Okay.
I like do you guys like their amended format?
Mm-hmm.
I do too.
Very much.
I tried to make it more organized.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I like it.
I like it. Oh, I get it. Second review of us. Okay, go ahead.
School assignment is the next one for your review. And this one went to the board at the last meeting.
I have another change to it too. Sorry.
Okay.
Under sibling on page 6 of 10, I know that we were going back for the second review because of the transfers for athletic participation and the capacity issue. The sibling policy reads that a middle or high school student will be allowed to transfer to a school within the cluster where he or she has a sibling currently assigned, except if the sibling is in the cluster via the transfer process. We meant that for the transfer process outside of the sibling policy transfers. So now that sibling policy is embedded in the transfer process, I would like the exception to not be, so if the sibling is there because they're a sibling and that's why they're at high school now, it would allow them to bring in their middle school siblings as well. So they wouldn't be accepted from their own policy. Does that make sense? So let's say you have a sibling policy where a middle schooler has got so you have a high school and a middle schooler. The high school graduates and the middle school has moved up to high school and they have now a fourth grader, but they've moved up to sixth grade now. That high schooler is there because of the sibling policy, but now the sixth grader can also stay because of the sibling policy. So I tried to think about how to word it, but I'm going to leave it to you. It says, except if the sibling is in the cluster via the transfer policy, except for this sibling policy or something.
Yeah, we could put via the transfer process for criteria other than sibling.
Yes, perfect. This came up when we've gotten questions from parents about how the sibling policy works, and we just want to clarify it because I think we're all kind of in agreement that that's what we meant. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, and then I will make that change, and the request would be that this go to the board for approval at the May 1st meeting with.
Because that's just a clarification, not really a
Correct.
change. Okay.
Okay.
I do have one minor suggestion. On page 2 of 10.
Uh-huh.
Can we unabbreviate the SSA?
Sure.
Spell it out,
Oh.
ESSA. That's all I had. Anyone else? We're good with that?
Mhm.
So for 4-8 and 4-13, do we need to again recommend it to the board for approval this time?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve, to recommend 4-8 and 4-13 to the full board for approval.
Okay, so moved.
All those in favor? Aye.
And I think that, oh, I'm sorry, recognizing excellence, that one is for you for,
What?
I was thinking of a different policy. I apologize. The recognizing excellence is for you all next.
Okay.
You tabled that at the last meeting.
We tabled that at the last meeting, correct? Because we asked for more information with respect to National Honor Societies. And I believe that Dr. Jones has sent that to us, so we can go from there.
And we don't have a printout, do we? It was just email?
It was
Yes, I'm
just,
sorry.
That's okay.
here, do you want my computer?
I didn't get it to Katie in time.
Here's Oh, you do? Oh, good.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mine printed but didn't print out the whole thing. Yeah, I'm not so good at that.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you.
Okay. So could you
Okay.
just take a minute and explain what this chart is showing us?
So in response to your question last month, you asked for what are the current discipline numbers with National Honor Society, correct? How many were inducted here into the National Honor Society? And what would Check 2. Okay, this one's working. Okay, I'm back with you. All right, so you asked for what was the participation for induction, for number of students inducted into National Honor Society, and then how many would be invited based upon the criteria if it were, and of course, we're talking about one of the 4 criteria areas that they have to qualify for National Honor, which is scholarship. What would be the number of students invited if the GPA were 4.5 or greater, 4.0 or greater, or 3.5 or greater? So if you look over, it talks about, first of all, from last year, the number of students who were invited under scholarship to apply. That very first one, for example, at CATA, 79 students were invited to apply based upon the scholarship, the GPA qualification. You see next to that how many students made it through all 4 criteria and were inducted into the National Honor Society, which is 59.
So can you just explain that to me? So they're invited and eligible to apply.
Mm-hmm.
There's an application, and you said there's 4 criteria. Who reviews that?
So the faculty council at each school approves the charter document, the charter guidelines, and then they go through each of those stages. So you have scholarship, you have character, you have service. So you have each of those recommendations that they go through.
Okay.
Okay, so 79, let's use CATA as the example. So 79 were eligible.
Correct.
And is that saying only 59 accepted the invitation or only 59 met all 4 criteria?
59 accepted after meeting all the criteria. 59 were invited to attend, were inducted. Yes.
Okay. So it's not that 59
That only
were
50,
denied
right.
because they only met 3 out of 4.
No, ma'am. In other words, there are 20 students or 20 who were invited to apply that either did not complete the process or make it through the process or chose not to participate.
Okay.
So there were 79 that qualified.
So if you look at Cuthbertson,
Yes.
400 out of 405
hmm
in the 10th grade class were invited or eligible to apply, but only 74 of those made it through, or 18%,
That's correct.
Yes.
where CATA had 75%. Okay. I get it now.
So when you look at this chart, just based on scholarship, what that shows you is that if you had a consistent GPA requirement of one of the requirements across all high schools, it shows you what the cutoff would be for 4.5. So using CATA, that would show you that 0% of the 10th graders would qualify on the scholarship to be inducted if the GPA was a 4.5. If it was a 4.0, 50% or 51% of the 10th graders would qualify on the scholarship criteria. And if it was down to a 3.5, almost 80% of the 10th graders would qualify to apply. It doesn't mean that all of them would be accepted, because you have to go through the entire process. But it does show you that 3/4 if or higher of the 10th grade class would qualify at CATA just on the GPA requirement if it was a 3.5.
Would be eligible to apply, not
Correct.
qualify.
Would meet the
Correct.
scholarship criteria just based on
But
GPA.
then if you look at, so I get the CATA one, but then you go to Cuthbertson, and 400 out of 405 were invited. But if we did it at 3.5, it would only be 248. So what's the criteria now? It's got to be lower than 3.5,
You
right?
know, I sent that and I don't
I have it. So the criteria is actually 4.0 for Cuthbertson.
For Cuthbertson, it's
For Cuthbertson High School,
4.0.
4.0.
What is it for CATA?
CATA's 4.2.
Forest Hills?
Don't have Forest Hills
Uh-huh.
on the list. Marvin Ridge is 4.3.
Mm-hmm.
Monroe, 3.4.
Parkwood?
Parkwood lists a 93 average.
Uh-huh.
4.1 for Piedmont. 3.5 for Porter Ridge. Sun Valley, 4.0. Weddington, 4.25.
Dr. Jones, you'll get it for Forest Hills.
Yes, ma'am.
And why does Monroe not have any?
Monroe Dr. Healy collected this information. Monroe did not provide it by the time
Okay.
we provided it. We
Okay.
presented this.
So historically, like Cuthbertson, Sun Valley, I was thinking that there was more. Why is there such a disparity among Union County public schools on such a wide range between a 3.4 to a 4.3? Why are our high schools not equitable?
So again, this goes back to what National Honor Society has presented to schools, that it can be driven by the faculty council, and it's the charter that is presented from the school. So the school system has never overseen or required a minimum or maximum. We only step in if they're not following National Honor guidelines. So they basically have been told they can set that based upon faculty council and charter approval at their school.
But when we have the Sweet Salute and, the Kiwanis Scholarship or the Rotary Scholarship, and, there's a disparity among our high school students on what they have on their resume and their application. So I'm just curious, where we stand as a school system, why we would deny a high school student in one high school an opportunity that if they were a student in another cluster or lived in a different cluster, they would have a better resume or a better scholarship application or a better college application. So I'm just curious why we've allowed our high school faculty to have different standards and not be equitable for Team UCPS.
Right. And again, I think that our next step is we can take this to our principals and we can discuss and we can share this information and look if we can come up with that similar piece. Again, we're just talking about that first step, that scholarship piece that, you know, that we have, but we certainly can take that, have this discussion, look at the differences and see how is it that we can look at consistency for this. And
the only reason why, I mean, to be quite honest with you, that has happened is because of two reasons. One, the National Honor Society governance structure requires every high school to have their own charter. And number two, we have said to high schools historically, your faculty council needs to come up with your charter, and we've allowed them to make those decisions. There's not been a board policy or any governance from administration or from the board to dictate or to tell all high schools what the minimum should be. And if that's something that we want to move in that direction, to set a minimum GPA across all high schools for consistency, then I would recommend that become an actual board policy that we can then use with our principals to say, this is what we believe we need to do.
Yeah.
When you took the Beta Club disparity to the principals, were our principals shocked that it was kind of all over the place when they found out that Beta Club was not consistent? Were they in agreement when we made that consistent? Or, I mean, do our principals even know that there are students getting in with a 3.4 at one school and some are being denied at other schools? How did our principals receive this information? Because there's a big difference between a 3.4 and a 4.25.
Yes, ma'am. So the Beta Club discussion was actually handled by Dr. Healy, and they resolved that within one meeting. Of course, Beta Club doesn't require
a charter
and a faculty council and all that. So that was very, I think, simplistic to be able to do. Our principals are aware that there are differences in the first criteria with the minimum GPA. They are aware of that, but the Beta Club, it was solved fairly easily in one meeting.
But as of today, it has never been discussed in a principals meeting to let our principals know that we're all over the place and that Union County Public Schools does not have a good criteria, that we're not equitable for National Honor Society.
Dr. Healy indicated to me in that meeting that there was discussion that we may have to come back and look at this as well. They did that. They did the beta because that was the first request. They did that, but there was some discussion that there were differences.
Is updating your charter a time consume? I mean, is it a burden?
I don't believe it is. A couple of years back, when we had an appeal, I receive appeals every once in a while with National Honor Society, and I spoke with Mrs. Felder, who is she handles all of compliance issues nationally for the organization. And she and I had some conversation, and I asked her would she go back and look at all of our charters and make sure that they were all in compliance. So each charter was evaluated. So we found problems like there were some charters that said a student could have automatic dismissal, and that's not possible with National Honor Society. Once you're in there, we made those amends. Or there were some charters that were charging different amounts for participation. So we had all of those. So what I would think is we would submit the charter. We would ask the schools to make the change. The charters would be submitted to the office where they would be approved and then returned to us. So I don't think it's that. She returned those to me within a week. So,
you know, one of my concerns as a board member is we just approved a realignment process. So what if a student was a National Honor Society and got in with a 3.4, but was reassigned to a school that requires a 4.0 or 4.25? that student would lose their National Honor Society eligibility?
So we faced this actually the last time we did, we had the redistricting. And the direction that we sent which is based in the policy, is the student who is in National Honor Society is automatically transferred to the new National Honor Society. If there is any deficit or any problem, they are given time to improve. And I did instruct if any students were taken out because of that, they needed to notify us. And we were never told of any students. We never heard of any students who were taken out of National Honor Society because of that change.
Are you put in National Honor Society since it's 10th grade enrollment? Is it at the end of your 10th? Is it at the end of your 10th grade year?
It's rising 11th grade.
So you
when they're
don't,
11th
well,
grade.
I'm trying to understand when the induction is.
11th grade.
So if you met the requirements at the end of 10th grade in Miss Merrill's example, would you be inducted
In the fall.
at your new school if they had a higher?
And I said that induction is 11th grade. I'm correct. I am correct. It would be at the end of the 10th grade.
It is, okay.
It would be at the end of the 10th grade.
So they would already
because
be
they
in
do
it.
that transfer over.
Okay.
All of that was supposed to be taken care of
Gotcha.
for the students.
Now, I thought inductions for Beta Club were at the end of 10th grade, but National Honor Society was 11th grade. And some of those haven't happened either. Some of our schools have had inductions and some of our schools have yet to have an induction.
I'll have to get.
And we have 10th graders today that still are not inducted
Let me back
at some
up
of our
and-
schools.
Let me back up and gain that information from all the schools. I can do that and send it to you.
And it was my understanding that they take your 9th grade GPA to determine if you get in 10th grade for Beta, but they take your 9th and 10th grade GPA to determine if you get into National Honor Society in 11th grade.
That's what my understanding.
Mhm.
So I don't think there's any inductions into National Honor Society at the end of 10th grade. I mean, is there a school that's doing that? Okay, don't know.
I
No
will
idea.
find out.
Okay.
I can tell you that Beta at Sun Valley is 9th grade end of the year
Okay.
because it's happening tonight
Oh, wow.
at 7 p.m.
Okay.
And we have 10th graders at Piedmont that still have not been inducted to Beta Club for the whole year. And we haven't received any applications to record service hours. There's been no information for community service.
I'll get information on
And
that.
some of our websites, you can print off the form to document and track your community service. Some schools have that on the website, and some of our other schools there's no information on how to track your community service. And as a parent, I will say one of the great benefits of these two opportunities is community service. You know, getting these, students out into the community and volunteering, and some schools are doing it and some schools are not doing it. And I've checked all the websites for all of our high schools, and some of our websites are outstanding.
Mhm.
All of their forms and deadlines and due dates and inductions, everything's on the website. And then some of our schools have nothing.
I would think that we would go with 9th grade for Beta Club because she's right. We would want the kids to be out there doing community
Community
service.
service
They
every-
do some amazing things, especially for our elementary schools. So
Okay. I will gather this information.
I have a question on the chart. So let's look at Cuthbertson again. 400 were invited or eligible to apply, and that's with the 4.0. But if you go over to your 4.0 and the number of 10th graders with the equal to or above a 4.0 is only 137. So how did 400 get invited?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I have a feeling they invite the whole class, and then they have to prove grades and stuff like that. That's what I think.
I bet so.
It appears to me that that's what they're doing. So then really it's, if there was 137 with a GPA over 4.0, then 74 of them got inducted. which makes more sense. They just may, and Marvin appears to be a little bit the same.
Yeah, so
They-
Margaret is the
They
same.
may invite more people and then they just have to prove
Right.
Yeah.
grade
Mhm.
point as, because didn't you say
think so.
academics was one of the 4 things?
Yes.
So maybe it's one of the
Yeah.
things they have to prove.
Yes.
Weddington seems out of whack also.
Yeah.
'cause
Porter Ridge a little bit too, right?
Hard to tell.
I think that's, they just may invite more that are on the cusp or maybe, anyways, okay.
So using this chart, I guess you will take this to the principals
Yes, ma'am.
and decide, whether it's 4.5, 4.0, or 3.5,
Correct.
and decide
Correct.
on
And get
this.
their input and bring it back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
One of the things that I was just looking at, and I think that I was trying to get to the last time, is do we really have the same number of kids from each school in it being inducted? Is it kind of like a percentage of the class? And with a few exceptions, they're all pretty close to somewhere between 15 and 20% of that class, the number of inductees,
Mhm.
not the number that have applied or anything. And there's a few exceptions to that, and I think we can talk about that later. But it does appear to be that we're in the 15 to 20% range of each class,
Sure.
with a couple of exceptions. And I think, yeah, we might want to put some percentages on here too of induction versus the 10th grade enrollment. Or I don't know if you want to look at, I also did the percentage of those who applied and those who got in, but I don't think that I think that we may have different standards of who can be and apply. Maybe you can just apply, but you have to prove grades at some point.
Okay.
And I know that the National Honor Society's guidelines is an average, I think, at 85 or higher. And so I do find it interesting that Parkwood says a 93 average.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure, I would ask the principals, is it easier to calculate an average? Or is it easier to work off a weighted or unweighted GPA? Because we only provide weighted GPAs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the other question for the principals would be, do you like the way Parkwood is doing it, where it's a simple average?
Sure.
Because
Versus the
it
GPA.
gets kind of difficult when you start talking about weighted and unweighted GPAs, because we don't even provide our students their unweighted
Mhm.
GPA.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you go on Power School, it's their weighted GPA.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
and I'm assuming, with 4.2 and 4.25, those are all weighted.
Mhm.
Now for Beta Club, I think that was unweighted. The 3.5, that was unweighted, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
So, I think it gets kind of difficult for, students and parents and everybody trying to figure out, okay, well, how do you calculate, I've got the weighted, how do we calculate the unweighted? Or you just do a simple average and you know what your kid's average is. I would be curious to know which one would be the smoothest, consistent way to do that. Weighted, unweighted, or average.
Is there a field we can turn on in Power School that gives the unweighted GPA?
That's a good question.
Because I believe that
think
I
there is.
used to be able to see my child's unweighted GPA. But I don't know if there's a way for us to turn that on, because that might be helpful for parents, because I know some colleges are not interested in your weighted GPA to be.
Okay.
I have a very interesting spreadsheet at home calculating unweighted. And I'm sure I'm the only one in my household that can read it.
Friend who has a
Yeah.
spreadsheet.
So are we going to table this one then for more information to the next meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Set up a meeting with principals.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm definitely good with table, but just encourage the principals that we're all in this together. And if the benefit is to get more students out into the community volunteering,
Mm-hmm.
and to be more equitable among all of our students, to be able to put on their resume, their college applications, their scholarship applications, education foundation opportunities, You know, that's the goal. We want a high school in the east and a high school student in the west, north, south. We want them to all be able to have the same opportunity.
So for Beta Club, it's their sophomore year, and then for the induction and for National Honor Society, it's junior year.
That's what it is by one.
Are you saying that's our rules?
That's where we're inducting. Beta is our sophomore year, and for National Honor Society, it's our junior year for inductions.
We'll talk after.
Thank you very much for looking into this for our students.
Okay, policy 1-4, this is the policy manual review, right?
Correct.
So will we be done with chapter 1?
This is called Michelle's spring break.
I know.
This is, and I don't know, and I'll send you all a copy. I put together for my own benefit, but I will put it, and I'll probably put an FYI in the board packet. I made a chart, my own handed in a little chart that's got every policy in chapter 1. And I went through each of the policies and, is it in your packets? Oh, thank you, Katie. So I went through each policy in chapter 1.
Should be
And any policy that was reviewed, and this, I did this based on the new revisions we made to the policy. Anything that was reviewed in 2018 from January forward, I put those dates on there. And then, because now the charge is for me to review them. And so any ones that I just reviewed and found in my collection of other districts and the school board association policies, no needed changes. I just put the review date, and it says, like, the first one says 4/3/18 by GC. That means on April 3rd, I reviewed it. And then the ones that say bring to policy PCM policy committee meeting in April are the ones that are behind it for your review. And then if it was reviewed by the board, it obviously has a date, and then by BOE. And so I will do that for each chapter. I've kind of broken up the year, and obviously because this policy wasn't approved until I think it was the April meeting, or May meeting. I'm sorry, March meeting. I'm behind, so I'm going to try and get these to you quickly. I normally wouldn't try and put all the policies that I want to change in one chapter in one meeting, but to try and get us on schedule, that's what I have. And so the policies under 5A are the ones that, based on my review, are ones that I would recommend changes to. And we can walk through them individually. Does that make sense? Okay. 1-4 board responsibilities. The only change that I made to that one is to add the chief officer title, which was not in the policy on page 3 of 5, where it talks about requests of information from central office staff, because we had every other potential.
Do we have associate superintendents?
There is the possibility. We don't happen to have any currently. There have been some in the past, but we have those options. So that would be the only recommended changes in that policy, and I would recommend that one go to the board for review.
I have a question.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
Will we remove associate?
I would recommend that be left in there, since there's the potential for us to have those, and then we wouldn't have to change every time the structure changes. The next one, duties of the chair. I took this.
Does anyone have anything on?
Oh, I'm
No?
sorry.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Nope. Go ahead.
Okay, duties of the chair. This, again, I took a review from other districts as well as the school board association and added those. Not all of these necessarily do we do, but they're things that we may want to.
And just because I used to be a securities lawyer, can you capitalize board everywhere?
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah. it's interesting because in the, like the School Boards Association, they all have it lowercase and then some districts have it uppercase.
I think it's,
It all depends.
we're not always consistent, but I think
Yeah.
we do use it uppercase, just like chair is uppercase. And not that it really matters one way or the other, but
And I'll say change the
consistency.
chair to, I'm gonna change it to just chair. So
Yeah, and the
chairperson.
very last set line, you should take out board in front of it by the chair.
Yep.
I'm good with those changes. Anybody else?
Chairperson,
Yeah, I'm gonna change it to just chair.
just chair.
Yeah. Since I have it both ways,
Mhm.
we use chair generally.
And that should be uppercase, right?
Yep.
And like paragraph 2, you pulled this from the North Carolina School Board Association?
Yes, ma'am. And it's consistent with the rules that the board has adopted.
We have them already in our
Right.
rules of procedure,
Yeah.
but it's rare that we ask to be recognized
Yeah.
before we speak. I hope you don't make us start doing that. I'm just going to throw that out there. But if we have a meeting where things kind of start to get crazy with people talking over each other, then you would go to a
Right,
procedure like
right.
that.
And previous chairs in my tenure here have used that authority to call on folk and decline folk to talk. All right.
Okay.
Next one, 1-10 board meetings. Some of the language, obviously, and I'll do the boards.
Same thing, yeah.
Yep. Some of the language is in other places, and I've put into these policies because it's hard for the community to know which policy necessarily to look for. So if it's applicable to this one, I've tried to maybe duplicative with language in another policy, but I thought it made sense to have it in an easy place. I've added the types of meetings because we really didn't have that in there. The reminder that obviously you are a single body and only can conduct business as a body. And then just the compliance with the open meetings law. And then I did some where we had some of our headings were all caps, some were not. So I'm trying to.
I didn't have any changes there. Anybody else?
Okay.
Appeals.
Appeals 1-18. This again, I have pulled from what our practices as well as from some other districts. We've had some questions as to what appeal looks like, so that's why I've done the board or the form of an appeal. Obviously, we have questions. Sometimes folks just pop up with lawyers, so I want folks to know that they have to let us know ahead of time. So that we just are ensure that the board is represented or the school is represented, and then a reminder against retaliation.
Now, all this stuff in writing is going to be online or no?
I'm sorry.
Is this going to be online too?
Yes.
So even though it's in writing is actually going to be the online forms?
Oh, this appeals. I don't know if we're going to have online.
That's what I was asking. Are we
I'm
going to do
sorry.
that or not?
I don't.
There's no discussion right now of doing that. Okay, we're good then. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I'm good. Okay.
Now I could put language
No.
or online when available.
No, if we
Okay.
ever do it, we'll change it then.
Okay.
I mean, I'm good with that.
okay.
Sorry. I don't have any changes to this.
The facility design policy 128, there is a change on page 2 of that, and that's compliance. That's required by state law, that language. So that's why that's been added. And just so that you all know, all of these policies have gone to cabinet staff for them to review with their departments to make sure
Awesome.
that they're good with them.
Okay. I don't have anything. Anyone else?
Nope.
Great. Public records.
Public records,
It's changed a lot.
it has. And part of it has been under public records defined. It was important, I felt, when in reviewing this policy, that we made sure that people understood what is a public record and what's not. Because we get a lot of questions as to why can't I see that? Why can't I get personnel files? Why can't I, those kinds of things. And so it clarifies further what people can see, and it will then allow staff to point to a policy when a parent says, well, how come I can't see my son's teacher's, personnel record because they talked meanly to my child. Those kinds of things, and it helps. The really critical one is obviously the school improvement plans and the schematics and those things, the emergency responses.
That we don't really, right?
So, I also wanted to add some language, and I'll again fix these boards. The beginning language to say, yeah, we have all these things you can't see, but we are committed to giving you public record, so that it kind of softens the blow. And then a process for requesting them. And then I just titled things that weren't titled.
I like the changes. Thank you.
Okay. So I would ask that those all go to the board for review at the May 1st meeting.
So we need a motion to approve 1-4, or to recommend 1-4, 1-5, 110, 118, 128, and 132 to the full board for review.
So moved.
All those in favor? Okay.
Okay. Then we have two before you that are based on statutory changes.
And one you just deleted, right?
One I deleted because
Okay.
it made sense that we just have it in one, combine them, because they're the same thing, basically, and just make it all purchasing requirements, be it state, local, federal. And Mr. Covington and his team and folks from Mr. Strickland's team, like Ms. Lamar and her staff, had a lovely webinar yesterday with the state to talk, or with school of government to talk about these new requirements. And we are required by July 1st to have a policy that addresses the purchasing requirements that have changed for the purchase of federal, under federal grants, with federal dollars. And so what we've done is taken the different requirements where it's state and where it's federal, and put these new requirements in policy, which is, like I said, it's required now under law.
So it'll all be in 2-22 now?
It'll all be in 2-22, and we'll get rid of 223, so there's no confusion as to where to look.
Okay.
I will be asking you to potentially, and I want the board to, and when we look at chapter 2, to renumber some of those policies, because we go from like 225 to 248,
Right.
with nothing in between.
Maybe at the end of the year. Maybe at the end of the year, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, and just renumber everything.
Renumber everything. Start off the new year.
So that everything's
Or school year, whatever way.
in order.
Okay.
And not these huge gaps. But sometimes what I use the gaps for, when we have a new policy, I stuff it into an empty number.
Right.
But
I had no changes to this. Me either.
okay, so we would
Candace?
recommend that this be reviewed by the board. These two be reviewed.
So they'll go with all the policies in one as well.
They will.
Okay.
I just was trying to separate them as to the reasons,
Perfect.
so that you knew. How
I
to-
like the new format of the thing a lot.
Me too.
Thank you.
Okay, so I need a motion to recommend to the board for review policy 2-22 and the deletion of policy 2-23.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, and new policy,
Yes.
which we don't have a number for.
We don't yet. I'll figure out what number is blank. Energy Conservation Program. This one is at the request of Mr. Strickland and his team. And it was great because he actually wrote it and submitted it to me. It's really kind of exciting.
Awesome.
Or borrowed it. I'm not sure where, but he did a good job. And so,
And this is okay with the company, because we're required to do this by the company that we hired, right? So they're good with this draft? Okay, sorry.
That's part of our agreement with them, but we should have one anyway. We didn't have anything that was specific enough for our
Okay.
needs.
So this will go under 2 somewhere?
yes.
Or
Yes.
4?
Probably. We don't have a facilities chapter, so we'll figure out where to put it.
Okay. Okay,
Good spot.
I liked it. That was good.
Yeah.
Anyone have changes?
We could put it under chapter 1, actually, probably, because we have facility design there. Put it chapter 1.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I'll find an empty number.
See one. Okay, so we need a motion to recommend to the board for review a new policy energy conservation program.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, and now before we adjourn, the
Thank you.
Facilities Committee has asked that we switch dates with them if possible for the next meeting of the Policy Committee. So instead of being the fourth Wednesday of the month, we'd like the policy to be on the 16th, which is the third Wednesday of May. And then move the Facilities Committee to the 23rd because we're waiting on bids and it would be better if we didn't have to do 2 meetings.
And they generally do a Wednesday meeting, is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
So it would be the PDC's available. We're already there. We're just flopping the dates. What? 16th? Is that good? Yeah, is that good? 16th, yes, at 9 o'clock. Okay, so let's go with that. Our next meeting will be May 16th at 9 a.m. here at the PDC.
And just for the committee's information, the SPTT committee members agreed today to set a regular schedule, and they'll be before policy on our regular 4th.
Okay, so then
that'll be
will that be starting next month in May?
Yes, they'll go before facilities.
So
yeah.
we'll have to move facilities to 9 a.m. We're usually at 8, so we'll just flop it. Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, in favor? Okay, we're adjourned.